Now welcome to this stage, former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. I should tell you, we got three chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors joining us today. Cecilia is one of my favorites, and she is the president of Brookings. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
I think I haven't seen you since a night at the Kennedy Center. We had a great time. But it's really great. Thank you. We've had just a very, very full day and full morning. I haven't moved much from this spot. Team, I want some more coffee. Would you like something? I can get stage service here. But we've had a really, really great day, Cece. And I just want to kind of stay, one of the areas we've been kind of struggling with and all the component pieces of how to think about the American economy. What drives growth? What are the component pieces? What are the anxieties and blind spots? You've thought a lot about the people side of this, about workers, workforce. And I have to tell you that when I worked for Senator Jeff Bingham in the 1990s, I thought when it came to workforce training and trade adjustment assistance, we kind of lied to Americans. We kind of faked it. We weren't very good at it. We would have, a Levi's plant in Roslyn, New Mexico, move to overseas, and we would fool them that here is this plant. I think we've gotten better, but I'd like to know from you whether on the workforce and upskilling side, we're actually any better at it than we were 20, 30 years ago.
Okay, easy question here. Well, thank you. And I have devoted my life to think about labor economics, and I'm really thrilled to be here today. At Brookings, we really try to think about evidence and bring evidence to decision makers. And so, I have colleagues that are thinking about this. So in terms of literally job training and skilling, there are various components. One, we have our K through 12 education and our post-secondary education, so formal education, which I think is an important part of having workers that are very resilient and are adapting. We can talk more about that, especially in the age of AI. In terms of job training, which is where TA, the job training assistance and JTPA, and if we think about that.
All that stuff,
I'm actually kind of with you. It's not that I think that we're selling them a bill of goods. I'm actually, if we look at the evidence on the impact of job training, improving the outcomes of workers who've been displaced.
Dismal.
So I'm a little more optimistic than dismal.
Everyone is.
I think actually if you look at the best studies, you actually find that workers benefit, but it's not enough to compensate for what they've lost.
I see.
And so it's part of the toolkit. It's necessary, but it's not going to be sufficient. And if we think about now, I think that's the context in which we really want to think about it. What are we training them for? And that's always been part of the problem and part of the challenge with job training is with what we call general skills, which is really how to think and how to read and how to do math and how to anticipate and how to keep learning. Like you can teach someone to do that, they're flexible, they're going to keep learning. But a specific job skill, it's been very important for employers to be at the table with education providers. This is where unions come into play. But how do you really build a curriculum that is forward-looking so that you understand where the puck is, you can skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is? That is really hard, especially in this age of AI and technology.
So what is the data in the Brookings studies, empirical studies showing about the tsunami of AI technology coming in and how workers are either adapting or how we're doing upskilling? Give us the AI piece of that, and are we treading water? Are we drowning, or are we going to be able to thrive?
So, AI hasn't been around that long, at least ChatGPT.
I know, but it's coming fast.
So AI has actually been around for decades, right? So if you go to the computer scientists, artificial intelligence in its general form has been around for decades. It's the large language models that have really taken off. And the large language models have been around. ChatGPT introduced, 3 years ago. So I don't know, that seems very soon, not too long ago. So my colleague Molly Kinder actually has data from OpenAI, and she's been really understanding what the tasks are and the education levels and what are the skills that people need and are using them. And what we see, and this may not be much of a surprise, is that really the occupations that are most at risk, that are most using these LLMs, are those that are more service-oriented, or not service-oriented, but are more cognitive-based. Which tells us that where you would expect to see the displacement, which will be new in our society in terms of technological changes or labor market changes, to have the technological innovation really impact white-collar workers rather than blue-collar workers who are working with their hands and are doing more physical work. And that is the part that I think has many people in this room a little more on edge. It has the part where people are starting to ask, for college graduates, what are the implications? Because they typically end up in white-collar jobs. But that is where we see the impacts today and where we expect to see them going forward. Of course, innovations in robotics will also come in and disrupt some of that thinking as well, because that's also obviously going to replace more of the physical jobs.
Cecilia, one of the interesting data points that hit this week was a poll that showed that a substantial number of Americans don't think four-year college is worth the deal. And I remember talking, I won't tell you which Midwest major, super big university, can figure it out maybe. So I asked the chancellor of that, do you need to change? Do you need to adapt? Do you need to modify how you reach out and think about some of the people that aren't necessarily choosing or going on to college? How do aren't we squandering and leaving a lot of talent on the table? Even people that have been previously incarcerated or had some speed bumps in their life, aren't we missing out on the talent equation a lot? And his response was really stunning. And it was an Atlantic roundtable. I never heard anything. He says, no, we're doing absolutely everything right, and we need to do no reform or anything different. That was exactly what he said.
Wow.
And someday I'm going to out him. But it was a remarkable, posturing and hubris. And I'm just interested in, as you kind of look at that equation, as we're looking at, we see more career tech ed efforts. You see a lot of investments in trying to find, Greg Ip of the Wall Street Journal, wrote this interesting piece about how the premium of jobs is no longer these service economy, lawyer jobs, but it's welders and plumbers and people in other areas. But I'm just sort of interested in how you see whether or not we need to see serious disruption of the upper education part of our education system.
Okay, so just in full transparency, I remain on the faculty at Princeton University, so I'm not uninterested in my own response to this question.
Would you answer it any differently if you weren't on the board?
No.
Okay, good.
But I just felt like I just kept to clear the air there. I think this is a both and. So the evidence really does suggest that a college education still confers immense value in this country.
Right.
There's been a lot of headlines about college graduates aren't getting jobs. But the reality is that early entrants, the early career people they've been having higher unemployment rates than the overall unemployment rate for the last 4 or 5 years since the pandemic. That predates, the introduction of ChatGPT. But the unemployment rate is still higher for those who do not have a college degree relative to those who do. So a college degree still confers economic advantage in our economy. That does not mean that the higher education sector doesn't need to be adapting. It also doesn't mean, in my book, that everybody should go to college. I've always felt that we need to be strengthening our K-12 system because not everybody wants to go to college or should go to college, and we need people who are going to go off and that don't need a college degree, but they still need to be able to read and write and do basic math. And so we need to have very strong high schools. And so if you look at how high school education, that's always been a challenge. I did a volume in the future of children on this. It's sort of that time of life, adolescence. I think there are a lot of challenges there. But that is where I think we need to be putting more of our focus. In terms of higher ed, they're gonna have to adapt. But they play an important role. That's a crown jewel of the United States. It's a source of a lot of innovation, which means it's a source of a lot of economic growth, to circle back to the main question here. And so it's an important sector for us to, when I say protect, I don't means it's perfect, but it's still, in terms of the research end, which is not every institution, that is an important source of innovation and basic science, and we don't want to lose that. In terms of training our students to be flexible and adaptable, I think it's still an important, they still play a very important role there. And there's a really important role for people to be getting getting basic skills.
I want to ask you, and I just want to recognize my friend David Malpass, who's former president of the World Bank. David, I'm glad you had time to, come hang out. I like it when, significant economic players come in as a guest, and not, I may recruit you on a stage later, David. We'll see. But let me ask you, and I don't mean to be blunt. I feel like I'm Dave Schweikert sometimes. I inadvertently offend people with the way I frame things, but. I sort of feel like he made a very interesting point about demographics.
Oh.
That the demographic point is, I hadn't really thought about it because I've been thinking more about Japan and the shrinking population of China and the shrinking population, in Korea and a lot of other countries. But we're getting older in the United States. We're getting older. The inputs in the economy, have been choked down, a lot of the immigration. So I don't know how to say this, so I'm going to just get it wrong. Maybe did we have so much youth at some point we just didn't care about them all? And now that the population is shrinking and the number of 18-year-olds we're going to have is going to force us to be more focused on that diminishing important resource, is the fact that you don't have as many people to screw up with going to force us to be better. How's that for maybe? We
have the heirs, but no longer the spares.
Yeah, exactly.
I had never thought about it that way. I worry a lot about our growing dependency ratio, which is our declining fertility rate, and the fact that our population is aging, which has impacts on the size of our workforce, has impacts for economic growth. The declining immigration, our immigration policy is providing a headwind there. The cost of childcare is providing a headwind there, and all the things. I had never thought about it, Steve, in terms of, so that means that our 18-year-olds are very scarce. I have a 22-year-old and 24-year-old.
They're more precious than they used to be.
They are precious, but I think the bottom line, though, is our workforce and labor is very important. I agree with him. We're going to have to find ways to compensate for the fact that we are going to have a declining labor force, and so we're substituting capital for labor, meaning some of these LLMs and robotics, that will be part of the play. It is not the entire part of the play. I think the other reality that we have coming our way, and is actually here, is the fact that with our aging population, what's the fastest growing occupation that the BLS is projecting over the next 10 years? Do you want to take a guess?
I have no idea.
And it's by a long shot, home health aides.
Oh, yeah.
3 times faster, 3 times more job growth there than the next job, which is software developers, which we'll see how that goes. But home health aides and helping people who are at the other part, at the later part of their lives, is where we are going to need workers. It has traditionally been where we see more immigrant workers, and it's not very highly paid. And so it's not a very appealing job, an occupation for someone.
I happen to know the number because we did an event last night, and we have 63 million people who are already caregivers in their own family. That's before you get to the layers of nurses and other home health care aides. So it's a staggering number. So throw into this bastion AI. Now, one of the big debates in the AI world is AI with guardrails or permissionless innovation. And if you're thinking about the geostrategic level, there's a lot of advocates of permissionless innovation. I'm interested in the question of, rather than being a victim of the AI weather, how can we begin thinking or framing about AI, particularly in the jobs and workforce level, to design it so it's an adjunct as opposed to a displacer? Maybe that would be naive, but I'm just interested if you have insights. We're going to have Pierre Yard here later. I'm going to ask him the same question. How do you make it friend rather than foe?
The person you should have on the stage for that is Daron Acemoglu, the economist, Nobel Prize-winning economist at MIT, who's done a lot of thinking about that. And
next year.
And okay. One of the things he says, for example, is, and this is something I've thought just a little bit about and want to do more on, is our tax code favors investments in capital rather than investments in labor. Huh. And we may want to rethink that, or at least rebalance that. We could be encouraging companies to be thinking and developing AI that is more complementary for labor rather than substituting for labor. What I worry about in just the substituting, and I was having a nice conversation about this, and I do with anybody who runs an office where they are replacing or reducing the numbers of entry-level people, is people's learning is still going on, especially early in their career, and we know that often it comes from job changing, but there's a steep learning curve at the early part of one's career, and those people then become the mid-career and the people who actually get a lot of specific training. And if we're not training them to use, whether it's using the LLMs, using the technology, whatever it is, you're still going to need that judgment. But if we're not training them, if they don't understand where the bodies are buried and how to query and really how to ask the right questions so that they can work with the technology, what does it look like in another 5, 6, 10 years? And what is the workforce? And do we have the workforce that we really need even to work with the kind of technology that we have? And so I'm pretty worried about this. My brother is a pretty high-level programmer, I mean, really high-level programmer, and he's been playing with some of this. And he pointed out to me he did an experiment. He had an LLM start a program for him, and he and a buddy, they both went to Stanford, and it said the amount of work it took for them to take away the mistakes that the LLM had put in the code. He said it took a lot of work. It wasn't worth it in the end, but they had to bring their own judgment to understanding where the LLM was going wrong. And he said it took, I mean, this is decades of experience in computer science. So what are the mistakes? What are we actually, if we don't have people who are there, who know how to interact with this technology in a way that's really sophisticated and really does generate the kind of productivity growth, which we know is potentially there, but is not there just because you have it. And we have to train people to know how to do that, and that's part of what Daron is arguing.
One last quickie, as one think tanker to another. You know, when I was at the New America Foundation, I used to tell our fellows, and Maya McGinnis was one of our fellows, you know, it's easy to embarrass or shame the bad decisions of government. It's harder to put a better idea on the table. And I said, your job is to take some risks and roll some bowling balls into status quo thinking. You know, in the think tank, in the policy world, what do you think the biggest opportunities to crash through status quo thinking are?
Can you just say that again?
What do you think the biggest opportunities for think tanks to obliterate inertia?
See, I actually think that the biggest opportunity came on January 20th when President Trump was elected. And we had Elon Musk and Doge and just a rewriting of what the federal government looks like, what our international relationships look like. And so I invited my colleagues at Brookings to think big. Because we have, you know, there was inertia. It's not like people thought that things were perfect beforehand, but there wasn't quite the same, you know, urgency or even opportunity to think big and think, well, if you want to build a better mousetrap. So I think that has been our biggest opportunity. I am trying to, you know, encourage my colleagues to do that. I think it's energized us at Brookings, and we're focused on it because I think there is tremendous opportunity there.
Well, I want to thank this big round of applause to our former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, the president of Brookings, Cecilia Rouse. Thank you so much.